Hi everybody, this is Dr. K from Holistic Minds. I want to tell you the story about Lulu. Lulu is a little 6-year-old. We're changing names, ages, all of that stuff. But we'll say Lulu is a 6-year-old that came to see me for follow-up in the clinic. And the original reason why parents brought her to see me is because she had ADHD, she was impulsive, she had bouts of anxiety, she was having various behavioral issues. And part of why Lulu's story is really interesting is it would have been so easy for me to go run down the rabbit hole of treat her gut, treat her diet, treat these things. And I would have done her so much harm. I would have done her so much harm by only focusing on those things and treating them primarily and missing the bigger picture of why she was having these struggles. So, as far as the gut issues go, it turns out that she was having stomach pain, she was having digestive issues. We ultimately found that gluten and dairy were a problem for her. We did stool testing, she had overgrowth of Clostridium, she had overgrowth of various other things like E. coli, and there's a lot of literature out there that says that, Clostridium and E. coli can actually be the cause of certain things like ADHD, anxiety, and so forth. Except there was something way bigger in Lulu's story that would have been easily overlooked, and in fact was overlooked by everyone prior to the family seeing me. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, I consider myself so darn lucky because I've been able to learn and train by some of the smartest people I can imagine, and you can probably imagine, who I'm having them actually share with you. And if it wasn't for colleagues like Dr. Zaghi and Dr. Sammy, who have taught me about things like tongue ties, I would have overlooked that this 6-year-old had a tongue tie that was causing all of her issues. You see, she has the Clostridium, but it turns out the Clostridium and these weird bacteria overgrow when someone is in a constant stress response. And it turns out that Lulu, from day one, had a tongue tie that no one paid attention to because no one thought it was significant. She was never able to feed well. She was the 1-year-old that spit out certain foods, and as soon as parents came to give her chicken, steak, any kind of dense protein, she absolutely refused it. She, at this age, at the age of 6, and every year preceding this, even the thought of her eating something like these foods is absolutely impossible. So she's only eaten soft foods, basically like peanut butter and jelly before. Now they're doing like almond butter, whatever. I mean, she literally can't stand the experience of eating certain foods. Now, why the hell is this important? How is this related to her ADHD and anxiety? Well, let me map out her story for you so you can see how all of these things unfolded. So she had this tongue tie because her diet was so limited. She was eating a lot of gluten and dairy, which a lot of these kids do, and you may have one of these kids at home yourself. Because they can't tolerate the experience of eating foods, they'll only eat soft foods that basically they can take one bite and swallow. They don't chew because they don't know how to chew. So they basically eat these foods, which then cause inflammation in their system. And in Lulu's case, she ended up having these monstrous tonsils and adenoids that were causing severe airway obstruction, which then caused her to become even more anxious, an even bigger mess. So they went and ultimately had these taken out. She ended up having ear tubes because she had recurrent ear infections with 14 courses of antibiotics during her first few years of life. So they got the surgery. Suddenly the parents were like, we couldn't believe how quietly she was sleeping. She would go from every night. If you can imagine what that's like to sleep that way, she wasn't sleeping at all. She wasn't sleeping at all because she was obstructing her airway. So they got the tonsils and adenoids taken out. Suddenly she was sleeping better. For the first 6 months she did great. But guess what? Everything came back. The issues came back. She started obstructing again. She started having airway issues. Now, 2 years, 3 years later, she's having the same breathing issues. And when I sent them to another ENT, sure enough, her tonsils were causing an issue. But the underlying theme through all of her story is actually the tongue tie. Because if this poor thing can't tolerate the experience of foods, and we take for granted that how we chew and experience the eating of food is pleasurable and comfortable, some children don't have that same ability. For them, it is the most uncomfortable, unusual, inappropriate experience they could imagine. So they avoid it. They avoid it. In the case of Lulu, she was avoiding these foods because she hated the experience of eating them. And through that, she started having nutrient deficiencies. She has cholesterol deficiencies. She has other things that have happened because she's just naturally trying to survive. Now, with the tongue tie, it turns out that one, the tongue doesn't sit in the right position, so it never goes into the upper part of the palate, which is what we need to expand the palate. And one of the things that was really interesting when I looked at Lulu right off the bat, her palate was flat. So this part of the face that should come out actually did not come out. It was very flat, and her face was actually a little asymmetrical. One side of the face had actually grown out more than the other. And she had all of this dental crowding, which ultimately the dentist wanted to do orthodontics. They were just going to pull out some teeth and straighten them. And I said, no, that is the last thing you want to do. And all of this had come about, the airway issues had come about, the eating issues had come about, the sleep disorder had come about, all because this poor thing couldn't lift up her tongue and touch the upper part of the palate, where it turns out there's actually a pressure point to cause us to go into a rest and relaxation state, a parasympathetic state, when the tongue can sit and touch that part. So she wasn't building out her palate, which would be necessary for her to have a nice airway. She wasn't stimulating this parasympathetic pressure point, which would cause her to calm down. She couldn't eat because of the tongue tie. And if he had missed that piece, we could have done every magic trick under the sun. We could have done elimination diets. We could have treated her gut. We could have tried to get rid of the Clostridium. Guess what? None of that would have worked. The Clostridium would have come back. Everything would have come back because we need to restore the functionality. We needed to fix the structural issues that are there. I've seen cases where once we take care of the tongue, once we restore the functionality, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to fix the diet. I don't have to supplement them. I don't have to do anything because the system starts working the way that it should. The parasympathetic, sympathetic tone starts normalizing. Kids start eating more efficiently, which then suddenly opens up the nutrient content of their diet. And then everything just starts falling in like dominoes. There's also weird strain patterns that these children develop in the back of their neck, which can also cause the vagus nerve, which is also part of that parasympathetic rest and relaxation state, to calm down, which also helps them be more relaxed. And I've seen cases where once the tongue is released and then they go get an osteopathic or craniosacral treatment, all of a sudden the child is just chill. They're happy. They're happy because now they are functioning the way that we do every day, but we take it for granted. Whereas this child is in a state of survival. And I told them, I'm like, Lulu is in a state of survival. Every day she is just trying to survive. Every day she is just trying to make it to the end of the day. And you know, before we supplemented her with some plants, Lulu was a horrible mess in the morning. She'd wake up crabby as hell. In the afternoons, 5 days a week, at least she would just crash, which were her adrenal glands, because her adrenal glands had taken a hit because this poor thing had not had 1 day of good, restful sleep. And by boosting her adrenal glands, we were at least able to normalize part of her functioning. But had I just treated the adrenal glands, had I just gone after the Clostridium, had I done these things and not addressed her airway, addressed her tongue, addressed her functionality, we would have not done her any service. And I want to share this story with you because it is so pertinent to the discussion that we're having, and it is so critical for us to look at things from a holistic fashion, and it is why we have holistic minds and why I'm giving holistic minds to you, because once we start seeing the total picture of these children and we piece all of the pieces together and in a comprehensive way look at these children and treat their underlying primary issues first, and then start working on the other things, because I am going to treat her Clostridium. We are going to expand her diet. We are going to get more nutrients in her, but not right now. And by strategizing and prioritizing, one, the living hell the parents have to go through by fighting the child every day to do something that they cannot do, the life of parents become easier, the functionality and life of a child improves, and at the end of the day, all of these weird behavioral issues, the ADHD, the anxiety, whatever, go away, because the child is now functioning the way they were designed to, the way they were meant to. Thank you so much for listening. This is Dr. K from Holistic Minds.